Hey guys, welcome back to Intro to Substance Designer for Environment Art. And in this week, this is week 5, I think we're on this week. So we're going to have a look at texturing an asset in Substance Painter this week, actually. So we've kind of covered, in the last couple of episodes, we covered my process in terms of doing tileable textures and then sort of texturing an asset, and now we're going to sort of replicate the same process but in Painter. So I kind of mentioned this before, but basically my general process tends to be that I would do my tiling textures and anything that's sort of, you know, an effect or whatever in Designer, and then a lot of the asset, you know, prop work that I sort of tend to do, that side of it actually ends up in we'll just show you that. So yeah, anything like this, you know, these kind of props all done in Painter. So that, you know, that side of it, like the smaller kind of, to get that individual detail, that's where Painter's strengths are, in my opinion. So yeah, that's why I tend to use Designer to do the tiling textures and the actual props and assets in Painter. So yeah, so we'll revisit that basically. So the first thing I kind of wanted to talk through was, you know, this is the finished asset that I'm going to show you how to texture. So this is the kind of, you know, that's the final result pretty much. So I'm going to show you, you know, brief kind of how to actually, you know, get to that level of texturing basically in Painter. So the first thing I'm going to sort of show you, which is kind of like some of the most important stuff really, is the reference and the concepts and sort of my general thinking behind everything, and why I kind of, you know, textured it in the way I did, and how I approached that, and because that side of it, like, that's the part you don't see. Like, you see the final asset and you can work out like how the techniques, and I'll show you obviously the, you know, the technical side of things, but the thought process behind it and that side of stuff, that's the part that you're not going to see. So yeah, if I sort of do my best to explain that, but basically, so this is for a scene that I'm making, like a diorama scene with some other parts in it, but so I won't go into too much depth about that, mainly because it's still kind of in process, so I don't want to, you know, give anything too much away, and also like it's not that relevant to this. So yeah, the first thing I was focusing on for this diorama was it's a kind of robot workshop, and this is the robot that's being kind of, you know, worked on, and obviously you can see he's a bit, you know, used and a bit run down, and the idea is that, like, he's, you know, either sort of he's being recycled, or he's the guy that they're sort of working on to fix up pretty much. So I found this concept a while ago, which is by Joe Peterson, so you can find his link on here, but this is the concept here, and it's, you know, like organic, and basically the reason I chose this was because it's very organic model. It's an organic mesh, and I wanted to make something with like quite a lot of curves, test my modeling skills, and also it gives some interesting effects, you know, in terms of material definition, things like that. So yeah, on curved surfaces you're always going to be able to, you know, catch the highlights a lot better, and that's just something, you know, that's worth kind of knowing for when you're modeling and things like that. So yeah, that was kind of the challenge, and basically his concept kind of jumped out at me because it's very, like, everything's kind of organic, but then it has these kind of underlying shell, which is, you know, the robot's, you know, working parts, you know, it's pistons and sort of gears and all that sort of stuff, like underneath it, that's the kind of its shell, and then everything else is these big kind of, almost like a car, I guess, like big organic body like shell pieces that, you know, lock together on top. So yeah, that was really interesting, and then I chucked a couple of other 3D things in, which I took a little bit of inspiration from the shapes in those as well, just to kind of define. So I changed some of the stuff, like I changed the legs design a little bit. So yeah, that's the kind of, that was the modeling sheet that I was like working off of. So we can get rid of that now, but and then I was looking at this as a material reference. So there's a couple of things in here, a couple of pieces of work that I found on ArtStation which were inspiring me for the materials at the time. So a couple of shots from Evolve, and they had some really nice material definition on those, like sort of painted metal, which was the kind of effect I was going for, and some other areas like these kind of like matte plastics, which were really interesting me, and then some real world reference as well, which is the, you know, those kind of like painted metals with that kind of erosion basically, and then it kind of highly scratched different details, and then this one at the top, because mainly because it had these kind of like dirty, like muddy legs, and I don't know why, but for some reason I really like that sort of feeling, so I wanted to add that into the actual model. So yeah, that's kind of what we're going to aim for, and so I'm going to sort of start in Painter. So what, like, as a first sort of setup, what we've kind of done, like, I'm going to just explain the layout. So I'm going to get rid of some of these layers as I work, basically, but this is just to show that this is actually, you know, the final stuff, like, in here. So these are the final, like, materials and everything all set up. So we may reference them a little bit, but I'm probably just going to do this from scratch because there's no real need. I might actually, I think I'm going to retexture him, but I'm probably going to change the color palette a little bit and maybe go, instead of going for this blue, I might go for more of an orange with these kind of red sections, just to change it up, so I don't end up retexturing the whole of the model again in the same way. I'd quite like to just do something a little bit different, and then that will give its own challenges as well, because you're going to see sort of me counteracting real issues as they come up, like balancing and getting the colours right and all that sort of stuff, which you wouldn't see because I already did that in the blue stuff. I don't need to actually do that because I've already kind of done it, so I know which colours worked, and I was happy with the colours when I was working, things like that. So yeah, so I'm going to kind of keep that reference on like one side, and I'm going to, so what you'll get, like, I'll end up providing you with this scene with everything in except the kind of, probably take out the layers that I had for the original model, and then just I'll either include the ones that I end up doing in the video, or just leave it blank. So basically at the moment this scene is set up, it's got in the texture settings, this is where you control like the different parts, so you can hit solo and that will just be those. So they've got their own UVs, so each one of these is their own texture set basically. So you got the legs, and the reason I separated the legs out, I didn't really need to do this actually, but I kind of found that later on, but what I wanted to do was texture each leg differently, and each arm differently, and that was kind of a little bit pointless because I could have just, the details I wanted to add were really small, so I could have probably just done them with decals, but I mean, it doesn't really matter too much. I can sort of change that anyway now, so it's not really the end of the world. But yeah, so we're just gonna, what we're gonna do is we're gonna focus on the body shape in terms of like a texturing pipeline to start with, and then we're gonna work on the other, like the arms and the legs and things. Actually no, I'll tell you what, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to work on the arm in isolation, because that's the way I did it when I originally did it. So I worked on the arm first, got my materials on the arm, and then I assigned them to the other parts. So I assigned it to the body and the legs, and then tweaked them for each piece basically. So that's my general workflow. Like, I'll work on one, if I'm doing something with like lots of texture pieces, I'll work on just the one asset, and then when I've got something that I'm happy with on this model, that's basically how I tend to work, just so that I can you know, isolate the areas, get the materials, like, so I'm happy with everything, and then work on that pretty much. So that's the general plan, and I'm going to provide you with the everything assigned, so you can see actually if you pull this up, the texture sets, we've got the normal. I'm not going to bother showing you how to do that because I kind of did that in the first video, and it's really simple. You just import them in, and I can just, what I intend to do is just filter by the type. So just do mech, and I'll do arm. So you've got the textures there, just drag and drop them in basically. I'll provide you with a scene already set up like this anyway, so it's not the hardest thing. But if you wanted to do your own model, that's literally how you do it. Make a new scene, file new, you'll get a dialog box which pops up with, and you can choose the mesh and the textures, and that's pretty much it. So it's really, really simple, not worth explaining really, other than kind of just really primitively. So then, like, this is baked from a high poly model, so all these details, like this sort of stuff, is all baked into the normal map. But then some of these other ones, they were actually added as a separate layer, which I think if we just go back to the left arm, we'll find that actually. Yeah, sorry, this takes a little bit of time to actually update. It's a bit slow, but maybe maybe it's actually in the body. Let's go into the body. Yeah, I know, I had a look earlier, so I know it's definitely in the body, but I added a load of normal map details and height map details in the body itself. So I'm just going to, first of all, I'm going to show you how to do that, because that was kind of the first step. So I had We'll just isolate this. So yeah, we've got the body. Basically, a lot of these details were baked into the height map, but then what I quite wanted to do was add a few more details, like little screws and things like that. It's just easier to do them in Painter and faster, because if I was doing them in the model, like, it would take me a little bit of time to actually like place the screws and then bake them in and make sure the cage kind of was like allowed for those, you know, those areas. So little details like these, like, they're so easy to paint in Painter, it's probably just worth showing you that how to do that quickly. You can see actually, if I turn this layer on, this is where you can see that as it increases, that's the parts where I actually was painting stuff in. So none of these lines existed before, but what I actually did was take it back, exported out the normal map and combined it into Designer so that I could get a more accurate curvature and ambient occlusion, including those lines basically. So that's the reason that it's now got those details on. But in terms of actually adding details, I'll show you how I was actually approaching that. So there's a few little things here. I just did them in a couple of layers so I could kind of control what I was doing. But the first thing to do is just to make if you make a fill layer, then you can control what you're doing. So if you turn everything off except the height map, and then dialing it left will, like, when you're adding details, that's gonna, you know, recess, whereas the other way is gonna pop it out from the mesh. So if you add a black mask, anything I paint into this now, we'll just find the model, is going to pop out from that value basically. Hopefully, anyway. Let's just make sure this is working. Okay, let's not, if we don't do oh yeah, oh, there we go. That's what it's just contained in the folder. That's why it wasn't working. So yeah, we'll just cover that again. So quickly, yeah. So you've got an empty layer. You could also do. I'm pretty sure you can also do fill layer. If you just take off, we'll take off everything except the height, like I said. Change the value, and then add a black mask. If you paint into that mask, you get the same effect. So it's kind of like, I found working either way is fine. Like, sometimes working in a mask is just a little bit easier because you can paint in and out a little, like, just by dialing the slider, whereas you would have to use the eraser to get rid of this. So I just quite like to work like this, just because it's feels a little bit less destructive to me. So yeah, basically you can pick a brush and paint in, you know, your details here. And then one of the things that I was basically doing when I was working like this was you can add these effects. So if you go into this button here, which is the effects like tab, if you click on that, there's different like filters and things like that. So if you click on a filter, you've got various stuff, but there's a blur that's quite useful. It's kind of like some of the nodes that exist in Designer basically. So I can go in and actually affect like the blur intensity. Actually, I probably need it to be on the mask rather than the actual material. Not that one, sorry, the blur. Yeah, so there you go. So see, as you're like dialing that up, you're getting, you know, a softer effect basically. So that's quite good. I think I used that. You can see here actually where I've like done these kind of indents, like, and then I've kind of drawn over the top. I've then like blurred that underlying one basically, and then sort of like if I wanted a softer detail or whatever, I've blurred that. So that kind of covers how to do the actual height maps. The other thing you can do is normal kind of like stamps basically. Yeah, so with the normal stamps, it's working in a similar way, obviously, to what we did with the height map. So you make an empty layer, and you're left with your channels. If you turn everything off except, so you've got your color values. This is the settings for your brush basically, and the material you're going to be painting on. If you turn everything off except the normal map, you can basically drag and drop some of these textures that now Substance Painter comes with. So they've included, since some of the new releases, these sort of normal map details, so you can drag and drop those into that channel, and that will be what you're painting in as your brush, so you can literally just click and you've got that normal map detail. And the same settings, so I'm just holding control and dragging up and down here to change the like orientation, and then left and right to change like the opacity. So that's really easy to actually just stamp in those values, get them in the right position. And if you want to use things like symmetry as well in these kind of cases, you can add those like little details in. So that's really nice to be able to actually add those little details in and have them come through on the model. So I think a lot of the screws and things like that, they have some really nice values in here that you can use to do that sort of stuff. So you can actually put in sort of screw details, like probably a little bit too large, but you can actually come in and put those in. So that's how I was doing a lot of those little ones here, just to give the feeling that things are actually bolted together or whatever. It's quite nice to be able to do those little details. So yeah, I would just say like you can just build up like a lot of details quite quickly just using those values, and actually come in and even if you've already got stuff in a normal map, you can kind of go over the top and start adding things in. So yeah, that's worth having to play around with when you're detailing up your models. But obviously I'd already done that and kind of got that stuff put into the model anyway. But if you wanted to go further with one that you were using yourself, or you wanted to actually add more detail to this one, then totally feel free to sort of do that as a first pass. And then I would bring that back into Designer and actually get your curvatures and things, because you can bake your textures in here, but generating them just like a new curvature and stuff just off of your normal map you can't do in Painter. So it's easier, you have to use a high poly mesh, so it's easier to just get, if you wanted those details and combining them with the existing one, you can do that sort of stuff, or either in Photoshop or also in Designer. It's a bit easier in Designer, so that's the way I tend to work. So yeah, so now we'll start, that kind of covers the first part, so we'll get rid of these meshes. This is just a color map, so this was baked from the model itself, the high poly and stuff, so you can see like the different, I'm actually was using this to define in here the ID map, so I can choose where I want my textures to go. So and those decisions were made off of that original concept basically. So I was looking at like that concept basically as reference to work out what I wanted to do. So yeah, right, so now we're going to move on to, I'm just going to give you a quick like breakdown of how this material is set up, and then we'll go into how I actually assembled this. So this is basically, if I just turn everything off except the bottom layer, so we can kind of just work out how that's going on. So yeah, basically this just defines the materials. So the first material that's kind of going in there is a shiny kind of metal. If you want to move the light around, just hold shift and right mouse button, left and right, and that will adjust the light source. So yeah, you can see that's just like a sort of a little bit worn but also shiny kind of aluminium-y kind of metal. So that was really used to just kind of go underneath some of the layers and stuff. And then the main work is in this blue paint material, so that's got a lot of sort of scratches and different build up and stuff like that. And then I sort of built up more layers, so we've got a plasticky rubber material, and this is at 1024, so the resolution isn't ideal, but like what I tend to do is work at a smaller resolution, and then if I want to up-res, like some of the other parts like the arms and things I got away with, like actually doing those at a smaller resolution, but the main, because it's the main face and stuff, I wanted to go for a bit higher resolution. So yeah, and then I've got this sort of like plastic, almost like a pre-painted kind of phase, I guess, because I sort of was after like in the reference, like let me I'll just get that up so you can just see that. So yeah, in the reference here you can see we've got this this green material, but like I got some feedback from sort of people in terms of like what that actually looked like, and a lot of people weren't really sold on the green. So I went for almost like a pre-coated plastic, and then like I imagined that this material here would have the paint, like the blue paint applied to it, or like this is a section that's like been repainted or something. Like that was basically the feelings behind that. Then I've got like a quick leather material because I had a few straps and things that are baked into the side panels, and then this is the layer where I did like the actual paint over the top, like that logo detail, and then I can't remember what else the other ones are. So the other ones are, they're just little details, so they're like adding different colour paints into here, and then this is where we're adding dirt, which you'll find actually in this, like I went in the actual painted metals, I went for like really harsh, kind of like very sort of, you know, detailed areas of like where the metal was exposed. So we'll just up-res it because it's a bit hard to see some of that stuff when it's like such low res. Just wait a couple of seconds while that updates. I won't skip forward on the video, I'll let that do that in real time so you get an idea of how long it takes to just go through all the layers. It's only a couple of seconds normally, it doesn't take too long, but with the video and stuff running, obviously it's a bit more, a bit slower, but to process through all of that. So yeah, there we go. Right, that's much better. You can kind of see what's going on now. Yeah, so you got these quite harsh details, like little edgewares and scratches and things like that. But the problem is, like obviously they're kind of noisy. So with the dirt, I was actually kind of attempting, when that comes in, you'll see it sort of like gets rid of some of the details a little bit. Like it's keeping them, but it's softening stuff as well, which just reads better basically as an overall effect. And then yeah, we had a final kind of layer of actual dirt, but that one's kind of like not really very noticeable when you turn that on. So yeah, that kind of covers the general layout. So what I'm going to do is show you how like I broke down each one of those materials, but we're going to work on, we'll just res this back down to 1024 so the performance is a bit better, and we're just going to work on the arm, because the arm is a bit easier to like break down the materials. I don't know why, I just worked on the arm first, and that was the thing I was referencing when I was working basically. So it's kind of good to just, yeah, like I sort of stuck to doing that and then went through and did the body separately. So yeah, right, so we'll just get, what we'll do is we'll get rid of these layers because we don't really need those, and we'll start from scratch. So the first thing that I do is I normally go through like smart materials, just because they work as good bases. Like even just like, so I know, looking at, if we go back to the reference for the materials, you can see like the first thing I sort of tackled was how to define this sort of like painted metal, which is why this is like the most reference that I've got, because that's like the biggest amount of work. So there's a couple of examples, like here's a 3D example of some sort of like orange painted metal, then there's a real world kind of example, and of how that kind of like the material, that's quite a good example actually. Like I tend to stick with things like that just because the real world reference is easier to understand what's going on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to have a look through some of the base metal. So you can see this is like a rusty kind of irony sort of steel looking thing. So that's the first material I want to make. So what I tend to do is just find something that works, that's working in terms of just like a base metal. So you can either pick stuff from the actual materials themselves. There's some quite good stuff in here, but the smart material is also really good. So I'm just going to have a play around. So I'm just going to chuck a steel on and see what that kind of looks like. It's a bit scratched and it's kind of interesting, probably a little bit too dark. Let's see what the silver arm is like. Yeah, this one's got some nice surface quality in it. So like I'm going to use that as a base, and then I'm going to go through and I'm going to tweak. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten it a little bit, and I might even just put like a tiny bit of colour into it, just because I want to, you know, give it a bit of variation and stuff. So then I'm just going to take out everything else that's in there, just so that I've got like this literally just the base material, and then I'll work through the layers and figure out, you know, what's going on. So this is just a base, and then I can tweak on that. So we'll just go a bit brighter to start with, and then we can knock back some stuff. So these are like kind of small details, so they're kind of not that noticeable. It's good to check as well. So if you hit the C key, you can see what's going on. It's easier to see actually sometimes when it's just in the channels. So this isn't really adding much to the actual. It's mainly adding stuff to the roughness, just to knock back some of the details and things. Just look at what this edges is doing. We'll brighten those up a bit. So what I quite want to do really actually, this is looking quite nicely, and then sharpen. I think the sharpen's a little bit too strong, so I'm just gonna go like, in fact, you know what, I'm gonna get rid of the sharpen. I'm not a big fan of that. I just want it to be like a sort of nice base metal, pretty much. So now I'm just gonna add a fill layer. I'm gonna take everything out except the roughness. So I tend to do this quite a lot. Like, you work with different channels, or just isolated channels, so you can work on everything at once, which is really nice. But it's also really good to be working on, different like variations basically. So I'm going to have a look at a couple of noises, and I'm going to actually work in a similar way to how I would in Designer. So I'm just chucking this material in here actually, which is just a noise, like the BM spots thing, just to give it like that variation that you've actually got like in the reference. So you can tile this as well, like in the UV scale. So we'll go a bit more tiled. Something like 10 maybe is fine. And then I don't want it to be too contrasty. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to get it in a good position. Then I'm going to chuck a levels on top. So you're working in the same way really actually that you would be in Designer. So we need to make sure that that's affecting just the roughness channel as well. So we can now start to dial up those values. So I don't want it to be too I don't want it to be too much contrast. I want it to still read like so we'll just play with the levels basically until we get something, and then I'm going to go into the roughness channel and just dial down the opacity of it. So you can see like that's just, we'll play with the contrast as well a bit, and then we'll just dial down. So that's kind of working quite nicely. So this is just as a base, and then I'm just gonna sharpen. There we go. Those details basically. You just want to sharpen like what's going in that roughness. And you can just change like how soft. It's just kind of going through, and there we go. So it's adding a little bit of detail, but nothing too major. And then I may just tweak see what the tiling's doing. There we go, perfect. So that's kind of the effect I was after really. Just to kind of give that noisy feeling that it's like broken up the surface, and it's kind of interesting, isn't it? So so we got that as a base. Now what we're going to do is we're going to add a painted layer. So with this, I tend to like, there's a couple of plastics in here, like the glossy ones. I tend to stick like, because I want the metal underneath to be quite like fairly rough, and then the plastic to be shiny. So it's like fairly new, pretty much. And then I can tweak that color. So if I go into the plastic base, we'll chuck this back to base color so we can see these updates, so you know what's what basically. I'm just going to have a look. What I want to do is go for like a more orange. This is a little bit pale, but I'm gonna like pick that orange as a base, and then I'll just add a bit more contrast to it. And I want it to be a bit like redder, so I want it to be that kind of, that's the color I'm like after basically. Probably a little bit, oh, let's just go back to a little bit redder. It's kind of, yeah, like something like that's fine. So yeah, so now we've got this kind of plastic, which is absolutely fine. That's working. So, and I'm just going to go through these and see what this is actually adding, so that I know like is this actually worth having. So we got a roughness variation, which is fine, and a bit of dust. Yeah, so that's fine. That's working quite nicely. Feels like a nice material. So perfect. Right, now what we're going to do is this is where sort of I would start to blend the two materials together. So turn both those on. Then I'm going to add a black mask, and then I'm going to go through the different generators, and I'm going to sort of start to, I'm going to start with the metal edgeware. I'm going to invert that, so we've got the metal coming through now, and that's adding some, some nice details already. So we'll park that, and then what I tend to do, the way I work in terms of like adding, like making these values like unique and stuff, is I'll look at the reference, see how the general details of the edgeware is actually working. So you can see here there's like these sort of like little scratches and little dinks, which is the stuff that I had when I was showing you the kind of finished material. So what I like to do is go through these different edges, like there's all these edges, scratches, edges, oobler, just drag these on over the top and see what each one does, and then you'll find some, like, you can tweak them and get some interesting effects out of those, and then you can blend them together on top of the other ones. So that's the way I tend to work. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these. I think that one's really nice actually, so we'll keep that one on there because there's some nice like little areas in there, and then you can multiply these over the top, so you've sort of got, it's not adding a lot, but it's actually just breaking those edges up a little bit, combining with the existing materials to just build up the layers a little bit. And if you feel like that's not strong enough, you can just bring that in, and then I'll probably I'll just keep that like in there so I know what that's kind of doing. And then let's have a look. I want to get some scratches in there, so we'll have a look at a couple of these, and I tend to just turn off the other ones while I'm working, so I can see like what effect that's having. So you can see the scratches, and I tend to work like, I know I'm inverting the mask, so I could, if I wanted to, I could put the metal on top, but what I like to do is structure my materials based on like how they would be in real life. So the initial base metal, then the paint comes in over the top, and then the dirt, like, so you're building up like it would be in real life basically. I don't want to like say, oh, like to do it to make the program easier. I like to sort of make it easier to understand in terms of like physical properties. Like I want to actually have it so that the metal is the first thing, then the paint's the next layer, so it feels like it's a real material basically. So yeah, this has got some scratches in, so we're just going to have a play around with that, see if I can get anything interesting out of there. Probably a little bit too strong, so it might just play around and see what we can get out of that. Yeah, it's not too bad. And then you can always, this is the great thing about Painter, you can go back and you can change that orange, like if you just don't feel like it's working quite how you want it to. Like, I want like that's the orange I want basically. I don't want like, I kind of want it to be a bit more of a redder hue. It's just tweaking it like the perfect colours. So this is what I mean about balancing. Like I wouldn't have had to do with this with the blue, because I can kind of go in and I've already got that sort of detail for free. So yeah, right, let's carry on with adding the masks now. And sometimes you find like you'll just, that one, like I'm not so sure about that one at the moment, but I've just chucked it in there for now to see, you know, what I can get from that. And I might end up coming in actually as well and just get rid of that sharpen. Actually coming in and adding those details, like myself, like adding in my own masks and things like that, and tweaking until I get what I want. But yeah, getting the scratches is the thing I want to kind of achieve at the moment. So we're just having a look at that. So we've got a couple of masks in there, subtle scratches, stain scratches. So let's try this one. Yeah, so we've already got that one. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to, because I can't get the effect after with the scratches, I'm going to make my own one now. So if you go into the mask, if you select the mask editor, and we'll just invert that so we can see what's going on, and we'll drag down the curvature. So these are basically these are the different textures that you've got plugged in here, and then these are some noises, so you can actually add your own stuff in there and start to build up your own kind of thing, and then you can say where you want like that texture to come in. So if I put the texture and then the ambient occlusion, that's going to start to come in, like that texture, the scratches is going to start to come in when I start selecting these and dialing these things up basically. So we're getting the scratches in like where the curvature is and the ambient occlusion now. Yeah, so now we're just going to have a play around with this, with the scratches. Get some more tiling going on. And it's basically just a case of like playing around with like what each thing does. So obviously the ambient occlusion is bringing the metal in on the AO, and then the curvature is bringing it on the curvature. But then these are the settings for the actual the scratches, like the grunge scratches. So I'm just kind of playing around with those until I kind of get something that I'm happy with, basically. So I'm not really that bothered about the curvature really at this stage, because I'm more just worried about the scratches, because I've already got those areas basically. You can see that's like what sort of difference that's making. And then I can go back actually and tweak these ones. So I'm just gonna, I kind of want to knock a little bit of the grunge out of that, because it's a little bit, that's okay, just a bit, I want to get rid of that grunge. So you can't see. Okay, let's just go up to this texture and dial that down a little bit. So I think the grunge in this one, the grunge is actually providing some of the scratches basically. So we can kind of get rid of that one and just work with this. Something a little bit more like that, and then can add those scratches back in over the top. and then I want to sort of knock back some of the scratches in this. So I'm just thinking I may go for something a bit more a secondary grunge, which is going to be sort of like multiplied over the top. So yeah, I'm just going to knock out the secondary grunge and just work on just the scratches here now, so that I can kind of understand what's going on with those. So I'm just going to dial them up quite strong so I can see that, and then you can basically play around with how many scratches you're actually getting. So I'm just going to dial that up, and the tiling sort of, and then maybe look at just blurring them a little bit, and basically just playing around with the settings until you get something that you like, basically. So you can mask out various areas and add like dirt to them, break up and things so they're not so strong, and little details like that, basically. So yeah, we'll just have a play with that sort of stuff. But I don't want the spots, I'm going to take those out as well, and maybe take out some of the dust as well. So I'm just looking purely at the scratches now, and I think that's working. So I can have that as an extra layer on top of everything else now, and you start to just build up layers, and I can duplicate that up and add some various stuff. So I think that's probably like fine to illustrate how far to go with it, but you can just keep kind of adding until you're happy with that. And then I think I'm just going to add a filter, and we'll sharpen those details a little bit, not by much because you don't want it to be too strong, but I think that's fine for how we are now. And then, so after I've made those kind of details, what I also wanted to do was make the metal underneath a little bit rusty. So we'll just find a rust and we'll chuck that in there, and then we'll add a black mask, and we're going to keep this fairly simple, but there's a couple of rusty nodes, so we're just going to play around with that and see what we can get with that. I think the rust is probably a bit too strong there. So I mean, I think that's okay, but I kind of want to, I'm just going to play around with the colour of the rust as well. I want to go for something a bit. What I might do actually is I'm going to change this to just the dirt, see what we can get out of that, because I think dirt sometimes works a little bit better, and then maybe we'll add the dripping as well, and just multiply that over the top so it's coming through in like the dirtier areas, and then we can tweak this a little bit, just so it's giving that variation pretty much. I think that's working quite nicely actually, but we just want to just have another variation of that, which is just slightly different, with a change in the colour, because I just want to vary that up a bit, and maybe we'll just go for just see what we can get from just like different values, basically. Yeah, I think something like that is quite nice. So, and then if we go for the thing on top, should get start to see some of the rust. So we'll group these together, so just hold Control G, and then we'll just chuck simple rust, and then we'll go metal base for that, and then orange paint. So we're just keeping it nice and simple, basically, so we can understand what's going on. let's just see how that's just kind of adding to that, basically, adding to those details. It's kind of nice as well when you get some of this stuff like the rust coming through, basically. That's probably a little bit strong actually, but so we'll just knock it back a tad. We go for like 90, I think. That's probably enough. Yeah. So that's working quite nicely. Getting a nice feeling to that now. Again, I'm gonna always something I end up doing, just tweaking that colour until I get something that I'm happier with. I don't know. I never feel like I ever get. I just go back between different hues just so I can see what's going on. So now I think I'm just gonna, as well, I'm gonna go for like, because when you get your sort of plastics and stuff, they have a little bit of variation in, so I'm just gonna go for an orange, which is just like a little bit lighter, and then blend those in on the edges, like a soft, only on sort of soft, because I don't want it to be too strong. Excuse me. So we'll see what that looks like, and you can see if that's another point. If you wanted to look at the masks, like if you hold Alt and left click, that will go into the masks. It's just because I want like a soft mask and I want to take the grunge out. So if I go for something like that, then I can sort of see how that's affecting stuff. This is just a sort of just give it that variation, basically. Might have to come out a little bit further actually, just because it's not giving much variation. You can kind of see that in the thing there. Yeah, it's not a lot, but it should just give it a little bit of variation. I guess if we tweak this as well a little bit, you might see a little bit stronger. Yeah, just giving a bit of variation in the paint, pretty much. So yeah, that's fine. Then what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to have a look at, there's a dirt as well. We want to just add that over the top of this material, and then we'll probably work a little bit on that. That's kind of it's always a bit strong in the mask editor, and the contrast is always really strong. It's just to add a little bit more variation, I guess. I just play around with those until I get something that I'm kind of happy with, I guess. Might just try, gonna try the normal dirt, see what that looks like. It's just an attempt to just knock back some of the details a little bit, basically. I don't want any grunge, really. Yeah, something like that. I mean, that was working quite nicely. Then I'm actually gonna go back, I'm gonna tweak the original metal, because I feel like it's a little bit too bright now. So yeah, that's like just a little bit of an adjustment that really helps, just to ground everything a bit better. So yeah, you're getting, like, just from building up all the layers and things, you're getting quite a nice looking material. So now I'm happy with that, just for now anyway. I'm going to group this together and call this orange worn paint. And then I'm going to add a black mask to that, and then I'm going to add a color selector, and because I've got the ID mask already assigned, it goes into it straight away, and I can pick the area I want that material to come through on now. So that's kind of how I sort of set stuff up. So then, like, I've got this assigned basically now to that color ID, and if I assign that to any other parts of the model, it's going to go in those same areas, because it's using the same. Click on the color selector, it's using that value, the RGB value. So now I'm actually going to make some more materials on the other section. So one of the ones I wanted to do is, because the rubber's only a small area, I find that I can probably get away with just using one of the base, like the smart materials. So I'm just going to have a play around and probably maybe I always end up like opening up a smart material, seeing what it looks like, and then tweaking the settings. I mean, I think that plastic rubber is quite nice. I think I ended up using something similar for mine. Rubber tyre. Got some nice areas in the roughness on that one, so I might just take those and chuck them in as well. It's nice, you find stuff from different ones, and then you sort of build those up over the top, just to sort of quickly make materials. So I'm not like doing anything fancy, I'm just taking, that one's got some cool dirt in it actually, that might be kind of useful at some point, but we won't look at that now. So I find that the surface details in this are a little bit too strong, so I'm just going to go into the height and knock that back a bit. I just always find some of them to be a little bit strong. So yeah, for this we're kind of looking at like in like some of the example materials, like this kind of underlying black material, like a sort of rubbery feeling. So I'm trying to just create something very similar to that, just because it's a good way. It's a simple material, but it gives you like a nice area of rest in the model, because otherwise you'll find like when you're going into high detail areas, that you're finding like those are going to be like way too noisy otherwise, so you need that balance. So I'm just sticking the plastics in there now. So yeah, then in terms of like the next kind of materials, like the ones I've got left are this silvery one and the green one are the main ones. So for the silvery one I wanted like the base, that kind of base metal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just duplicate this, so that's under the edit section, and then just drag that actually out of here, and then I'm going to add a black mask, and I'm going to hit color select, and I'm going to pick the grey areas. So we've got that like exposed metal actually now without any of those values pretty much. So what I want to do as well is I want to go in and just tweak this a bit further, so I'm probably just going to brighten this a little bit, and then I'm going to go through and I'm just going to go back in, and I'm going to tweak the roughness, so that the starting roughness is a bit shinier, because I want this to like pop. I want these metals to like pop a little bit more than the scratched kind of worn areas. So yeah, you can kind of see how that's working together now. So yeah, that kind of covers that. And then in terms of doing this sort of plastic or this sort of worn, you can see this in the reference like of this material. This is kind of like the feeling I wanted to go for. So you know, I was aiming for something that's like that kind of colour and texture quality. So it's a little bit dirty, it's quite rough, there's not much detail there. So yeah, I'm going to aim for something along those lines to do these kind of last sections. So the first thing again I do is probably start with like a plastic. So we'll go for, I don't know what any of these are, but I'm just going to chuck those on and see. So we'll just turn everything else off, and we can, this is the way I tend to work. So I'll work like with the whole material assigned to the model, and then just you know, see what I can get from like starting base materials and things. So I'm just going to go for like a slightly more yellow. Oh, I had it, that's kind of what I wanted then. Something like that, like an undercoat plastic, I guess, is kind of what I wanted. Yeah, don't undo that, because if you undo it, it loses like your colour selection for some reason. So yeah, something like that, where it's a little bit scratched and a little bit dirty. So I'm just going to find as well, I'm just going to sort of go for like a darker material there, and then I'm going to take everything out of that except the roughness, make that really rough, and then add a black mask with a generator and add the dirt, not rust, sorry, the dirt back in. Just to add, you know, a bit more surface quality. I'm going to dial the grunge up a bit. Maybe I'll invert as well. And then we'll go for more contrast. adding that, we're just getting a little bit of dirt coming through. Then I'm going to dial down the diffuse, so it's still going to be dirty in the rough areas. So if we go through the things, you can see that's adding, like in the rough, it's making it kind of different surface quality, but I don't want too much information in the diffuse. So then I'm going to chuck this, I'm just going to make this a little bit shinier in the plastic, so it just picks up, like if you're doing that, it's going to pick up like the areas that are dirtier easier, I think, basically, so you can kind of see. Then I'm going to now like add a fill layer, which I'm just going to turn everything off. And I do this actually quite a lot, where I find a grunge really, and just chuck that in, like something nice and soft, like any of these really, like just over the top, and that will just give you like another layer, and you can tweak the balance of that and the contrast and stuff. And I tend to just have a play around with that, and maybe we'll chuck a levels on, so we can, it has to be in the roughness again, but just so that it comes in like as an extra layer. So you'll find that will just give you a bit more of an interesting surface quality, basically. Just to break it up. So yeah, I think something like that's, I kind of want to take some of the scratches out actually. Yeah, let's get rid of the scratches because I'm not sold on those really. And then we'll go back and we'll tweak this colour a little bit, so it's a little, push the saturation just a tad. Yeah, something like that. That's kind of working. And then I'm gonna again mask in with the colour selector where I want that. I can turn on the other layers now. See how it's kind of working in isolation, because I mean that works okay, but it's alright. I just want to make it maybe a little bit darker because it pops out a little bit too much. I don't want it to be too strong. Something like this is actually kind of working a bit better. And then I'm going to go change the edge damages so they're not so right. Something like that. That's better. It's just about balance, and then you need to review in isolation like everything else. And then just to finish, like generally, I'm just going to chuck. We're going to go for like a red plastic, because it's going to be a tiny area of the model. I just want it in there, so it's not going to be very big, so it doesn't even really matter what that material is as long as it's just getting colour in there. So yeah, that's kind of the process for texturing. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to group this and put small detail plastic. So we got something there, and then we're just going to call this undercoat. So there, that's kind of it. And then so we're just going to give this a quick save, so we've got everything saved. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to like save out this as a I'm going to group it all together, and I'm going to save this out as a smart material, and I'm going to assign it to the other body parts, and so you can see like the whole of the thing in isolation basically, or the whole of the asset pretty much. So yeah, I'm just going to rename this, so we'll call this CGMA Mech Orange. So that if you name that's what when you hit create smart material, that's what it's going to be called. So you need to like make sure you get your names right. You can rename it afterwards, but it's just a bit easier to see. I wonder if it doesn't do that. Oh, okay, I tell you what, I've not called it that, that's why. My bad. Yeah, it used to the naming conventions I had for my project, and then I've just realised I've changed the naming convention, so it's not going to come up. Okay, so we got the material there now. So yeah, so we'll just save that, so just to be sure, because sometimes I've had a couple of crashes with Painter over the last few days, so it's just a bit easier to just to make sure everything's working. So yeah, there we go. So that's that, right? We're gonna turn everything else on, and then we're gonna start to chuck this material on, and this is where the kind of powerful part of Paint comes in, because you've got that. Because I've set the way I've set things up is that it's sort of assigned in the material IDs. Like it's going to take those same IDs and assign the materials to the same parts of the model, and you'll find that I might have to do a little bit of tweaking, but you'll find that it's going to look pretty good sort of straight away. Like, that's a good example actually. So we've run into this thing now where the grunge on that is a little bit too strong on, obviously, for the curvature that we're using and things. So this just means that I'm going to have to go in and just work out which one of those is causing like the strong grunge, basically. So it shouldn't be too hard to just come in and tweak the levels of grunge, basically, so that it's giving you a little bit more of a not so strong effect. Yeah, there we go. You can do something like that. It's a bit nicer already. Build up the scratches and then give it a sharpen. Yeah, so that's better. It's working. So yeah, that's that level. We'll just get everything, we'll get them assigned to the other parts as well, so you can see what's going on. You'll do this and then you'll realise, you have to review everything like as a whole, and sort of like start adding unique details to things and that sort of stuff, I guess, until you've got something that you're generally happy with, I suppose. So I'm just going to delete the other layers that I had. So that was from when I textured it before, basically. So we'll just give that a save as well. Yeah, so sort of once this is finished loading, once I've got all of these assigned, so this is the process where you have to do a little bit of waiting, so I'm just going to explain roughly, like, I'm just going to go through it and do it as I'm doing it. I'll sort of explain what I'm going to be doing kind of next. So yeah, obviously I've kind of worked on the materials a bit, and I might end up changing a few things around and things, and then the next, like, once I've got everything assigned, it's easier to sort of assess like what's going on. Like, looking at this already, I'm kind of finding that these like materials here aren't really working how I was intending them to work, so I may end up going back and changing those a little bit, because at the moment I don't really feel like I like those areas that much. I mean, the orange and stuff I'm pretty happy with. I think that's looking okay. So yeah, it's just a process now of actually going and balancing everything as a whole, because you work on things in isolation and then you realise, like, afterwards, oh, actually, I need to knock these details out, or I need to revisit this area, or whatever, basically. So yeah, that's the first step, and then the second step is when I'm going to kind of go in and actually add some more unique details. So like you saw in the original one, I had these kind of logos painted on the face, and things like that. So that sort of stuff, I'm going to sort of show how to do that, because that's where you're getting into everything I've done so far has all been kind of like driven off of the procedural textures, but I've not really done anything by hand. So I'm going to sort of show a little bit of that, just so you can get an indication of how I might go about adding. I mean, I did a little bit to show how to do the normal map details and things, but I never really showed that. So yeah, so I think this is something quite cool. So the first thing I kind of want to do really actually is change that white like undercoat material, because I just don't feel like it's working that well. So I'm just going to select one of the arms and go back and tweak that. I think because I was using a similar sort of colours to what I had in the blue, and maybe it's not working so well with the orange. So we'll just go in, have a play around, change some of the colours and see what we can get. I think if it's darker, it's going to work a bit better. That's the thing I'm finding. anything too extreme. I think it's just better to play it safe. Yeah, I think that works. So you can see on the other arm it just looks a bit weird. So what you can do actually now is you can, if I save the smart material again, that'll probably make another version of it. Yeah. So if I then delete this one, I can just reassign in the other parts of the model, and that will update. It is a bit of a lengthy process sometimes to do this, especially because my model's got like a lot of layers and things I've built up, so it can take a couple of seconds just to reassign everything. But again, because I'm only just making a small change there, it looks bad, but it would actually be quite quick to just go. Like if I'd made loads of changes to this arm and like reviewed stuff and changed it a lot, and then I went through and I was like, right, actually what I'd quite like to do is assign that again, like then you've got all those changes saved, so it's quite quick once you've got that sort of stuff set up. It's just a bit of a pain initially. So yeah, right, we'll just get them assigned to the legs, and then we'll start doing the legs. Is a good place to stop actually, because I actually want to do the dirt that I showed you before, so because that will it's a nice contrast because it's a little bit of a lighter material in the sort of style that I was going for. So if it's a little bit lighter, it's just going to contrast against the dark, because this is like, as a palette, like this is quite a dark palette because the oranges are dark, the greys are dark, so it's quite nice to put a little bit of contrast in there and pop stuff out with a lighter colour. And I'm going to do the same to draw attention to the face. So when you're thinking about like models and things like that, like the focal point of the model or the area that you want, it's got to have the most contrast, and so that's where I'm going to be adding like a lighter value. So you can see actually the lights are untextured at the moment because they're on a different ID, and I haven't got any other lights anywhere else. So yeah, what I want to do is like they'll be like nice and bright, which will draw your like focus and attention because they're going to be like emissive lights. So you're going to look at the face. That's going to be like the first thing you look at. It's like the first point to read. And then if I stick a massive big logo over the top of that, like that's going to draw attention to his face even more. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of that's sort of the plan. So yeah, we're just going to work on. Let's go for the other leg actually. It's a bit easier to see. We're just going to work on that now. You can see actually there's some straps like sort of in here that I need to chuck something on. So I'm just going to go for. Just have a quick look and find some leather. So they got some in here. We won't work on this like I think I did when I worked on it, like worked on this like a little bit more and got the leather looking really good and things like that. But I'm not going to do that for this, just because I've kind of already showcased like how to do that. So I'm literally just going to add a black mask and select those areas pretty much, so that you've got at least got something on there. Basically, you could tweak that if you want to, but I'm not going to bother for this example. So then I'm going to add like unique details. This is where I'm going to add the dirt. So what I want to do here is just add. I'm just going to select this dirt thing, and then I'm going to tweak that, because I think we'll use this initially, and then we can brighten things up. So I wanted like a gradient going from like bottom to the top as well, so I'll show you how to do that. But in here I'm gonna sort of make this not quite so contrasty. So I want it to be like a softer build up, not too strong. And then I'm just gonna pop the height out a little bit as well, so that kind of jumps out a little bit. And then I'm probably gonna find the height and just maybe add a little bit of a blur to it, so it's not so, because the problem is like the dirt like mask and everything's going to be a little bit too strong. So actually we'll do that on the mask actually, just because it's that's the part that's quite strong. So we'll just go for like 0.2, no, a bit stronger than that actually, 0.4. And we're going to get rid of like this kind of bumpiness and things as well, because it looks a little bit horrible at the moment. So let's just go and dial the height up a little bit. Actually, tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to get rid of that, and then I'm going to take the height out. I actually find I end up doing this quite a lot. I like end up duplicating the layer, and then I'll keep everything the same, but I'll take like out of the original material, I'll take everything out except the height map, and then like I'll control this as a separate layer, just because I don't want to like blur the diffuse and certain other things. So I literally, all I want to control is just what's going on in the height map, and that just gives me like a little bit more control basically. I'm just going to save actually, because that looked like it was going to crash then. It's just always good to, Painter does have some, I think Designer and Painter both have auto backup, so if you ever run into anything, you can, I think Painter saves them in its folder where you save the Painter file like as an auto backup, and then Designer saves them somewhere else. I can't remember exactly where they are, but you can find them like if you look on the wiki and things like that. So yeah, let's just have a play around with that, get the height coming out. So that's working well. Then I'm going to go in now into the diffuse, and I'm going to brighten that, because so this is it's having a gradient added to it, so you can get different values basically. And I just want to do that, but so it's not quite as, yeah, so it's a bit more like in the example reference that I had that I was sort of showing you, like that's a little bit more a lighter colour because it contrasts well against over the top. So we're going for something like that pretty much. So it feels like it's a bit dusty. This colour palette's actually very like reminiscent of like Sebulba's Pod Racer, just because I worked on that before. It's kind of in the back of my head, but yeah, it feels very like, I don't know, Sebulba. It's quite cool. So yeah, now I'm gonna add another mask, black mask to this, and I'm gonna control it like as a gradient from the bottom to the top. So if you add a generator, they've got this new one called the 3D one, and you can, if you look in the mask, it's easier to see, but basically you can control like where it's going on the model, so based on the position map that you bake. So I'm just going to put that to 1, and then I'm going to invert it, so now it's going from top to bottom, and you can offset that and change the contrast and stuff. And then I probably would just add a fill and maybe like some sort of grunge, like dirty grunge, just to blend it off in a bit of a nicer way. So just try that one, just to multiply over the top basically. We'll go for, where's the light? Lighting and stuff like that. Yeah, actually, I don't think it's probably not that necessary actually. Just having a soft gradient probably is going to be fine. Yeah, I think that's working quite well. So let's just get that, everything else turned on. Kind of have a look at it in relation to everything else. Yeah. Yeah, it's working quite nicely. So I'm just going to actually, I am going to change the roughness, because I think for some reason the dirt's quite shiny. I'm not really sure why. By default it would be like that, but it's an easy change. It's so strange that. Oh, it must be something in here then. that's weird because this isn't being controlled in. Very strange. I'm not really sure why that's doing that. I'm just going to get rid of that. It looks fine without the height map. I'm not really sure. Or just try, let's just quickly see if we can try making the height map manually. I'm not really sure. Why it would do that, to be honest. It might be because it's got like some sort of mask or something in it. I'm not really sure. It's very strange though. Okay, well at least that's working how it should be now. I can just, and then now I can add my blur. Maybe I should have just done it manually to begin with. I'm not really sure why I was doing that. Something in the settings. There you go. Yeah, that just popped out a little bit more. Perfect. That's much better. So yeah, then basically I just need to assign that dirt now to there. I wonder if I think I should be able to copy and paste between texture sets. It might be quicker than there we go, perfect. It's just a bit quicker than doing them manually, I guess. Like saving it as a smart picture. There you go. I also kind of wanna see. I did this a little bit thinking when I was actually texturing it before, which was just to add a little bit of dirt into the main body, just because it's like the main area. It's nice to like have that area like it's almost as if it's taking a little bit more damage and things like that. So let's see if we can get that in there as well. Just paste that in, and we'll just when I did this before, I ended up like taking the distance down like massively, so it's just kind of coming in on the bottom a little bit, but I think we need to change in here as well. Actually, this is another good point. When you've got these things here, you have a different change between like whether or not they're being pasted into the based on the UVs or based on like the triplanar stuff. You could just have a play around with how that stuff's actually being generated, basically. Like whether or not it is like triplanar and things like that will affect like how it is actually, you know, pasted onto the model. I'm not the biggest fan of that, so I'm gonna take that out. It's just worth to play around and see what that looks like, but not a fan of that. So I am gonna just see if I can get a quick dirt in there as well, though, just to see. I'll just dial that up, make it sort of kind of colour, something like that. It's just to add a bit more detail and maybe knock back a few of the noisier areas, basically. A generator and some dirt. Adding gradient as well, just to give it a little bit more value, distant values basically. I like that, and also take out all the channels, all of them. I'm after basically. And just back to those. I just want it to be a little bit dirty. I'm going to tweak this as well so it's not so strong. Yeah, I think that's working. It's kind of nice. It just pops the values a little bit. I'm going to copy that into the arms as well. just as a final level of added detail. Always end up, to be honest, like every model I make, I end up doing like a similar process. Like I'll do all the materials, get everything like working, and then I always end up adding just a little bit of dirt, because you find in everyday materials that you just, even like things that like the cleanest stuff ever, they just have like a little bit of build up, like unless it's fresh out of the factory, like it's never going to be you know, like perfectly sort of clean, so it's worth adding. So now I'm going to go back to the body, and I'm just going to add I'm going to add emissives into the face, and then I'm just going to show you how to do a quick logo thing as well, and then I think we'll call it a day there, and just wrap that up, and then yeah, we'll talk about assignments, homework and things like that after I've done that. So yeah, we'll just save that. So yeah, just to add the emissive, this is really simple. I think so. You have to add a channel, emissive channel, which you'll probably have if I provide you with a file actually. But you just add a plus there, and you can choose emissive. That's really simple. So now add a fill layer. It just gives you the option to select it. So we'll take everything out and we'll select emissive, and we'll go like for a yellowy kind of emissive basically, and then we'll tweak it once we've got it in the right place. So then add a color select and pick these, and you've got your emissive. So that's like super duper simple. It's just because I want these areas to be light, so I'll probably just make it a little bit less. There we go, so that's perfect. So then in terms of adding, what I actually did in my version as well was assign this kind of underpaint material to the face, purely because I wanted to like contrast that area a little bit more. But I'm going to leave that for now. I'm not that bothered about that. I won't tell you what I'm going to do is actually assign the leather to the straps in here, because I've kind of missed that section. So we'll just go back and copy the leather. You can see how quick it is to just make these sort of changes actually. You find like just assigning it, like getting that material in there, like done in like 5 seconds, super quick. That's the thing, that's what I find, like it's much better to work in isolation on something until you're happy, and then when you're happy with those things, like you just end up like copying settings basically between everything. Right, so now let's get this mask done. So I think for the actual thing, what I ended up doing, so we'll just I think I used some sort of stamp or something in here, like I used some sort of thing and then I edited it, so like a alpha or something. Yeah, you know what I actually think I ended up using was one of these like weird masks in here, and just like painted over it and stuff, because you just find like you'll like go, oh well that's kind of what I want, but not like exactly. So it's quite nice to just be able to do that. So we'll show you how to do that. So yeah, I'm just going to knock all the channels out for now, and then I'll bring them back in. That's the other good thing, is you just find it's like stuff that you'll always end up editing and adding. So just put this over the top, and then yeah, so it's just the fill layer, sorry. So yeah, then we'll just do a black mask, and we'll select, let's go for, do something kind of similar to what we had. Yeah, because in the I've still got the reference up. Oh yeah, here we go. In the reference it's this sort of weird swirl, which I didn't really like when I was thinking about it, so what I did was like something circular basically. So I think I just picked something in here that was kind of circular. So let's go for something like that. Just kind of, I think this might have actually been the one I used. Something similar, isn't it? Like it kind of works. And then I painted out of that. So just kind of select one of the default brushes. Make sure we got black, and we can just kind of take out those areas. We'll just we'll isolate this as well, so we can work and see what we're working with. You can see, like, it's funny, like, even just that, like, is working as a mask, like, quite quickly. It's just giving something, like, interesting to, like, contrast with the face, basically. So this is where I'm, like, looking at painting things by hand. Do you see what I mean? Like, it's working. So now, yeah, we'll stick with that, and then maybe we'll just add like some stripes, like, along these bits, because just to paint out of that as well. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, something like that's great. Okay, so now we'll come in. We'll just tweak the values. So we'll push it out in the height a little bit, so it feels like it's, you know, painted over the top, which is perfect. Then I'm just gonna go. I'm gonna go for some sort of saturation, not like much, but just enough to keep it in line with the color palette. But it needs to be that value that's gonna be like pushing it out a little bit. And then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go back to the smart material. I think it was like one of the plastic ones had some like nice values in it. So I'm just going to chuck that in over the top, and then I'm going to I'm just going to like take this mask. Oops, I'm going to copy the mask, add a black mask, and then I'm going to paste. So we've got, turn that off, you've got that material now, basically. And then I can just go back to base color. Yeah, and we'll just pick that value there so it matches then. I just want a bit of variation in the actual material. And then we'll pop the height out a little bit. There we go, perfect. So yeah, that's kind of that. And then I'm just going to do a copy of that, a duplicate, sorry. Oh, that thing, what I wanted to do. Duplicate layer. There we go. Yeah. So, and then I'm just going to add black mask, and I'm going to paint, because I think in the reference there's some little numbers and like detailed things, so I'm just gonna just paint in like this as a base, something like that. It's fine. Then you can just tweak this. Really rough. It doesn't really matter because I'm gonna do some other stuff in a second to just make that look good. So now I'm just gonna go in here and actually, I'm just going to tweak the value of the height. It's a little bit too strong. So you just want something, but nothing too much. So now I'm going to add a fill in here. We'll just basically, so we painted in that value. I'm just going to add some sort of grungy paint. I just want to like knock out some of the areas of that, just so, there we go. That's literally it. That's all I wanted to do, just to break it up a little bit, just because it's like, you wouldn't have it so perfectly you know, painted in, would you, like that. So you can just tweak these areas until you're kind of yeah, something like that. Then I'm just gonna do the same for this one, but I might change the settings for this one a little bit. So I'm gonna change the color of this as well. That's what I wanted to do, just because I want like to match maybe this logo color here. So we're going for like red or something. It's a little bit kind of too shiny as well, so I'll just pop that back a little bit too. It's a really badly painted 5, so I'm probably just gonna adjust that a little bit. It's not perfectly, it doesn't need to be perfect, but you know, at least make it look roughly like a 5, you know what I mean? It's not great. Just a little bit like regimented, like sort of be like the perfect 5 or something. Yeah, and then again, same sort of thing, so we'll just add a fill, we'll set that to multiply, and then we'll chuck this paint over the top, and we'll just balance until, just to break it up a little bit. Yeah, that's fine. That's not even a really nice, a small detail anyway. So yeah, that's basically the process. So yeah, it was a finished kind of thing. Contrast. I mean, like I would add the stripes to the legs and things in the same fashion I did with that if I was working on it a little bit longer, like I had in the original. But yeah, that's kind of the process for texturing that asset. So we'll just give that a save. And then I'll provide you with this file basically, so you can go in and look at all the layers and edit stuff if you want. And also, like, we'll sort of move on to talking about homework now, like assignments and things. So your sort of basic homework is to pretty much, you know, retexture this in a similar sort of style with the same like techniques. If you wanted to extend that homework, you can use your own asset as well. I think, because to be honest, like, obviously you've kind of learnt techniques and things in this, so you could probably do like hopefully do quite a decent job of texturing this now, with everything that's kind of been shown and the thought processes behind it and the reference. So it'd be good to kind of gather your own reference and maybe texture it in a different style, or you know, go for a more dirty version or an aged version, or do different materials or something like that, like in the same sort of thing. That would kind of be your basic homework. And then the second, kind of if you wanted to go a little bit further, as because we've sort of kind of talked about that in the other videos, like if you want to go further with the homework or whatever, then yeah, have a look at doing your own asset. And if you've got something that's like already you've got that you can texture with Painter or something, you know, you can either even download some of the examples off of the Substance Share, which we've shown before in the first video. So anything, it doesn't necessarily have to be your asset, it doesn't really matter, just as an example, like it's good to, you know, work out like how to texture stuff basically. So yeah, hopefully you enjoy the video, and I look forward to seeing what you produce and the work that you kind of you know, achieve with what I've sort of shown you. So and then obviously again, like, I'll be giving you feedback and critique and stuff like that, so hopefully that will help you guys out as well. So I look forward to seeing what you create, and I shall see you in the next video. Cheers.